Story inspiration can come from anywhere, sometimes taking a well-established genre and its tropes and building upon them, and sometimes coming like a lightning bolt out of the blue in the middle of the night when you really should be sleeping. This is particularly true in video games, where just about any bizarre idea, new or old, can be used to create a one-of-the-kind experience, for better or worse. Thus, occasionally, developers will follow the traditions of old and go down a route with inspiration from mythologies of the past. We've looked at a couple of these cases before, but today we're going to be journeying to the land of the pharaohs and looking for the best games that take their inspiration from the vast riches available in ancient Egyptian mythology. Whether they're tied intrinsically to the plot or simply performing various machinations in the background, each one of these titles features cameos from Ra, Set, Osiris, and a slew of other gods, and use them to tell tales which any budding Egyptologist is sure to find some enjoyment in. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best games inspired by Egyptian mythology. Number 10. Pharaoh. Like its fellow city builders, the historically themed Pharaoh places players in the shoes of a potential ruler, with a campaign mode that has them first establish small settlements, eventually building up to massive cities and trade empires before they can finally take on the eponymous role for themselves. Cities are established by providing housing, creating farms, and designating more industrial districts, and players will also have to set up specific monuments from time to time depending on which city they are currently in charge of. The mythological elements are admittedly a bit more in the background here, but even so, the gods do have a hand in how successful the city will be. Appease them and they'll grant boons to make life easier, but make them upset and they'll send disasters instead, adding an extra balancing act to the equation. This can be taken care of by ensuring that there are enough shrines and temple complexes dedicated to whichever gods are present in the area, something which gets progressively trickier the more gods you have to appease. The best thing is that there's a remake of this game and its expansion, Cleopatra Queen of the Nile, which updates the graphics and cleans up the UI, making this a title modern audiences can still enjoy. Number 9. Strange Brigade. Picture this. Thousands of years ago, there was a tyrannical pharaoh named Seteki, whose rule was helped thanks to her use of dark magic. Unsurprisingly, there were many who were not happy about this, including the goddess Wadjet, who went to war with Seteki and eventually imprisoned her spirit. Flash forward many years to 1930, when the archaeologist Edgar Harbin accidentally releases Seteki's soul once again in what we like to call a big oops. Thus, the so-called Strange Brigade, a team skilled at taking care of the paranormal, are brought to Egypt to help fight this newly awakened threat. This forms the basis of the co-op shooter of the same name, where teams of up to 4 can join up to take out mummies, giant scorpions, and other mythological beings as they attempt to contain Seteki's power once more. As they progress, they'll be able to upgrade weapons, set different traps, and take advantage of the branching pathways to try and curtail the enemy. There are also puzzles to solve, which often reward perseverance with special powers or particularly strong, unique weapons. One drawback is that this particular title doesn't have any cross-platform capability, which in this day and age is strange indeed. Number 8. Ravenloft Stone Prophet. Typically, when someone brings up Dungeons & Dragons, their minds goes to the one very specific place, that is, a fantasy world that is a very close cousin to that of Lord of the Rings. However, as the game has grown and changed, more campaign settings have been added on for tabletop gamers to enjoy. One of these is Ravenloft, which is set in a pocket dimension outside of time and space, which is made up of several distinct domains. This means that while Ravenloft Stone Prophet is technically set in the world of D&D, it still has a distinctly Egyptian storyline, because anything can exist in a world between worlds. In this particular domain, there's a mysterious wall of fire that's appeared and started causing problems, so the 2 player characters are sent in an effort to take care of it and its after effects, hopefully breaking the curse that's been put upon the land. As they proceed, they'll learn about the village Hak Akir and the mummies of Pharaoh Anktopot and the high priest Hierophant, who have been menacing them and are likely involved in the curse somehow. Even if it's not technically Egypt per se, all the trappings of a classic myth are still there and ready to be explored. Number 7. Pharaonic. Wearing its inspirations pretty squarely on its sleeves, the brutal side-scroller Pharaonic features an unnamed protagonist fighting his way through the world and his many enemies. The land has fallen victim to the Red Pharaoh's rule after he won the favor of the gods, gained immortality, and started imposing his will on the people, and now it's up to the player, with the help of some divine intervention, to track the pharaoh down and kill him once and for all. Seems to be a real theme to these stories so far, doesn't there? Someone should really keep all these tyrannical pharaohs in check. In any case, as the player makes their way through the world, they'll have to look out for both enemies and traps, and determining they have the right mix of gear and skills to ensure they can take on any challenge. Along the way, they'll meet up with the daughters of Ishtar, who can grant different divine powers, as well as a number of oppressed townsfolk who will also aid them in their journey. The difficult nature of the Souls-inspired combat won't be for everyone, but if you're willing to persevere, you'll find a unique Egyptian-themed adventure within. Number 6. Big Karnak. No, despite how it sounds, Big Karnak is not some sort of weird euphemism, but instead an arcade game from 1991 which follows a pharaoh warrior. There we go, mixing it up a little this time, who is trying to save his wife. Along the way, he'll run into mythical beings and actual gods who he'll have to fight in order to continue on his path. It's not just a straightforward brawler though, as over the course of the platformer, players will occasionally be met with puzzles to solve or come across sections that require them to jump from plane to plane in order to dodge oncoming obstacles. Otherwise, the pharaoh has a sword at their disposal and is not only able to smack enemies in the face with it as per usual, but can also use it to parry projectiles in an attempt to make it through safely. Of course, being an arcade game, this is still going to be trickier than it sounds, and making your way through each of the 4 levels and defeating the associated god at the end of each one will take a lot of patience, time, and most of all, cold hard cash. Number 5. Power Slave. When you're working with mythology, you generally have a pretty diverse number of powers, stories, and incredible creatures to work with. Power Slave, or Exhumed if you want to get European about this, ends up taking Egyptian mythology and somehow adding even more fantastical elements to create something truly mind-boggling. At the start, a group of soldiers, including the protagonist, are sent into the city of Karnak, presumably unrelated to the Big Karnak from previously, but who's to say. Unfortunately, before they can get there properly, their helicopter is shot down and they have to defend themselves from the hordes of aggressive creatures and soldiers of Anubis that have infested the area and become minions of the invading extraterrestrial forces. Oh yeah, there are aliens. Did I not mention that before? Anyway, glossing over that plot twist, the player ends up following the direction of the spirit of King Ramses throughout the game, who has been exhumed by the Kilmart as they're known and would really rather stay in the afterlife as opposed to be used for power by a bunch of alien bugs, thank you very much. At least that's how the console versions go. The MS-DOS version throws in a bomb to disarm as well. If nothing else, the wild premise alone is definitely worth experiencing for yourself. Number 4. Ankh. Right, it's time to leave all of the aliens behind for now and come back down to Earth, where we only have to worry about normal things like vengeful gods and reanimated corpses. Hooray. Inspired by other comedic point-and-click adventures, most notably The Secret of Monkey Island, Ankh opens with the protagonist Asil living it up at a party. Unfortunately, he and his friends make the terrible decision to break into a pyramid, which results in him smashing an urn and disrupting the resident mummy, who saddles him with a curse that will kill him in 24 hours if he can't work out how to remove it. I've left parties feeling worse, to be honest. That doesn't sound all that bad. The title and Asil's shenanigans were popular enough to spawn 2 sequels, both of which are just as good, if not better than the first, and it even got a DS port in 2008 along with the subtitle Curse of the Scarab King. That's not all even, because this version of Ankh is actually a remake of the 1998 Ankh The Tales of Mystery. Basically, every one of the titles in this particular series are pretty decent for what they are, so you're sure to have a fun time no matter which one you choose to experience. Number 3. Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy. There's been no shortage of movies and TV shows getting their own video game tie-ins with almost universally terrible results. Much rarer is a concept that starts as an animated movie but eventually completely scraps that idea instead, becomes a video game in its own right, and turns out to be quite good actually. And yet, that is exactly how Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy was originally conceived before being picked up by THQ and turned into a game instead. Over the course of the game, players can take control both of the titular demigod Sphinx and Tutankhamun, who each have their own areas of expertise. Namely, Sphinx takes care of a lot of the town exploration as well as all of the game's combat, starting with just a sword and unlocking a variety of weapons as the story continues. On the other hand, Toot is undead, so can't die, but is mainly used for puzzles and pressing otherwise inaccessible switches, and by their powers combined, they work to interrupt Set's nefarious schemes. Despite being quite well regarded in general, Sphinx sold poorly and seemed destined to be forgotten. However, it eventually made its way to PC and finally Switch in 2019, resurrecting it just like the mummy it features. Number 2. Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Guess what? Set's back and up to his old tricks once again in Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, and now poor Lara Croft has to deal with it. That's what you get for raiding tombs though, I suppose. In this, the 4th of the archaeologist's adventures, Lara has travelled to Egypt and starts out by exploring Set's tomb, where he's supposedly imprisoned. She manages to find the amulet that she set out to find there in the first place, but wouldn't you know it, the actions she took along the way and stealing the amulet have once again released the god into the world. Thankfully, all is not lost despite the god of chaos walking the earth, because Lara is able to enter another tomb, this time of Semerket, who is allied with Horus, Set's main rival, who's left behind instructions to bring him back as well. I'm sure that won't go wrong. Though probably not as fondly remembered as the games that came before it, the last revelation is still a great entry in the series and definitely better than some of the other options out there. Number 1. Assassin's Creed Origins. By far the game that most comes to mind when Egypt is mentioned, Assassin's Creed Origins is so steeped in the culture and mythology of the area that it's almost definitely the definitive experience for those looking to explore history. Following Bayek, originally a Medjay before the game forces his hand, players will be tracking down and taking revenge upon the people who kidnapped Bayek and his son early in the game, something which resulted in his son's death. This new take on the Assassin's Creed formula takes on some RPG elements and explores the origins, like the name, I get it, of both the Assassins and the Templars, all played out in an incredibly detailed version of Ptolemaic Egypt. While most of this adventure takes place in a fairly realistic world, apart from a brief hallucination-induced battle with Apep, the DLCs dive even more into the mythology, with Trial of the Gods in particular featuring some heavy hitters such as Anubis and Sobek. By far the most well-realised of the games involving Egyptian myths, this is one worth seeking out even if you're not normally a fan of the Assassin's Creed titles.